G'day guys, Clarky here. Welcome back to the Set of Six NRL Podcast. Whether you're watching, listening, walking the dog, driving to work, what other activities might you be doing whilst listening to this podcast, Oz?
Going for a swim if you've got a water-resistant phone.
Yep.
Who knows?
Unlikely, but look, there's certainly a lot of options as to how you could be listening or watching. The most important thing is that you are here and we appreciate it. 6 tackles. As always, a bit of an extra we did before. If you want to check that out, we did a bit of a draft, a little bit of fun. What do we got? We got a max rookie contract, guys, today. Would it work? Pros, cons. We're going to talk about, should the NRL set their focus to stopping the slow of play by trainers through injuries, or should we be focused on reducing the interchange? Because we'll get into it a bit later, but we firmly believe it's one or the other. Knights coaching fiasco, we got to talk about it. Probably dominated the headlines this week. Broncos, they're going to lose a lot of talent over the next couple of years, we believe. We're going to take a closer look at their roster. Joey Johns, the 8th Immortal, he's written the Bunnies off. He said they're no chance, so we're going to go through and say who we think could be no chance as well. And 6, only 2 weeks left of the regular season. We're getting a little bit soppy. We're going to get a little bit sad and talk about some legends that are leaving the game, such as Blake Ashford. No, I'm just kidding. Great player. But yeah, we've got all that coming for you and more. Oz, are you ready? Willing and able.
Are you ready? Is the question that Triple H always asks the DX. You just took me back. I forgot the rest of it. Saying, I was like, shit, that's why I was quiet for a second. Anyway, yes, I am ready. Are you ready?
Oh, I am ready, brother. I was trying to do a WWE thing. I don't know. Maybe I'll go fill up my water bottle and do the Triple H. All right, a max rookie contract, guys. Let's dive straight into tackle 1. So what I've come up with here, within X amount of years, you fill in the X, whether you want it to be 99 years, unlikely, or 1, whatever you want it to be. Within X amount of years or X amount of games played, Oz, a player can only sign for a contract worth X amount. Obviously, there's a lot of blanks to fill in there. So, for example, guys, it could be within the first 3 years or 50 games of a player's career, they cannot sign a professional contract for more than $500K. Some pros. Obviously, we've seen the effects with Ash Taylor this year, Oz, of what can happen when players sign on potential and don't live up to it. Cons, probably the biggest one that comes to my mind straight away is poaching. Poaching from the Super League, poaching from rugby union. Poaching from soccer. We've got to watch out for soccer these days, Oz. They've taken Ben Barber and they're getting Jared Hayne as well now. So, the threat no longer lies with just the normal shaped ball. The round balls are coming for us also. Right. What are some pros and cons that come to your mind straight away when you think of a rookie-based contract, and could it work?
I think it could. You've already touched on the big con, I think, which I think is only the real genuine con is that, for a player like Kalen Ponga, the All Blacks are reportedly calling, which it's a bit weird because that's a national team, but, he would obviously go to a Super Rugby team or something if that was to happen. So, let's just say he wants, there's a rumour he wants, over $1 million at Newcastle. Mm-hmm. Newcastle can't pay that. They can only pay $500K. Well, the Crusaders over in the Super Rugby, I think they're the best team over there. Might be able to offer that $1 million for him. So that's definitely a possibility. I think one of the main pros is that we'll see a lot more consistent effort out of younger players because they really feel like they're fighting for their spot. Absolutely. And once that contract's up, they want to prove that they do deserve the big bucks. A player that springs to mind straight away, who did re-sign with the Titans yesterday, that I'm happy about that, Mo Fotuaika.
Great player.
Now, he doesn't always get results, as we've seen with the Titans this year, but he's one of those players that does always put in 100% effort. Why? Because he thinks to himself, geez, I'm not on a lot of money. The ball's not going to pressure the club to play me because I'm on a lot of money. I can be dropped to reserve grade like that. So I've got to prove that I deserve to be in this team each and every week. So that's the mindset these rookies are going to have as well. Because especially with Mo Fotuaika, he is now a part of the highest paid forward pack in the NRL, not because of the money he's on. There are a lot bigger contracts. For example, Ryan James, Shannon Boyd, who I believe is the highest paid forward in the comp. He's got to compete with those guys, because even if those guys do slack off, well, obviously not as much Ryan James because he's been out injured, but if the higher paid guys slack off, they're probably not going to get dropped to reserve grade. Why? Because they're on a lot of money. We've seen this with Darius Boyd likely in Brisbane as well.
Definitely have.
So Mo Fodawaker's probably thinking to himself, well, if this forward pack gets blamed, even though I'm playing well, I'm probably going to be the one that gets dropped. So I've really got to make an impact. So I feel like that's a big pro. We'll see a lot more younger players putting in a more consistent effort each and every week. So
I agree with that. I agree with that. But the only question I would have is, are these players putting in the effort consistently? It's just they are young and it is such a tough league. Obviously, we know the NRL is the best rugby league comp in the world. Or I guess the big question is, how much does the mental aspect play into it? And like you said, one pro I did have was I thought it could potentially clean up the salary cap a little bit more.
Yeah,
Thinking back, I think it would, but not to the extent I was initially thinking. I thought at first it'd be a lot better. But then I thought about it, and generally if you're a rookie and you're within your first couple years, you're not picked up on big coin. Cameron Murray, Kalen Ponga, obviously rival clubs want them, but they're not shopping out the big money just yet. And only really cases I can think of that sort of, not mimic that, but of similarity. Ruben Garrick never got a chance at the Dragons, and then went to the Seagulls, and now he's a star on an upgraded deal. Potentially, if the Dragons had all their rookies under that minimum contract, they'd be able to maintain, develop, and keep their younger talent. Although that is just an assumption. And at the end of the day, if a player wants out, they want out. So, final say on the matter, Oz, would you support a max-based rookie contract, or do you think the risk of poaching is too high?
No, I don't think the risk of poaching is too high. I do like the rookie contract because looking at my pro, I believe my pro is... So, I'm for it.
Okay, I disagree. I just think for players like Victor Radley, Cameron Murray, Kalen Ponga, there's Britton Nakora, David Fafita. I think if they were restricted to a contract of $500K, I think rugby at this stage is desperate to become important again, especially in Australia.
The thing is, you're mainly only naming people who have come from a rugby background, sort of, or have had links to rugby union in the past. If a young player has grown up watching rugby league, loving rugby league, when they first start out, they're not going to care if they're on 500K or less.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. As they begin playing and getting better, then maybe. But then you'll say, look, at the end of your contract, we'll be able to pay you more. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And we've got to think as well right now, with all due respect, the rugby union system in Australia right now is not very good. I mean, they are in a bad place right now in terms of...
In actual fact, we're stealing all their talent.
Exactly. And... rugby league is becoming more attractive in Australia. It is more attractive than rugby union, but to more an extent right now, especially in states like New South Wales, guys like, I believe Cam Murray said he grew up playing rugby union, but he wanted to play rugby league. He was waiting for a rugby league team to try and sign him. I have a mate that I went to school with who's he's in the rugby system. He's not like professional yet, but he's above just your normal, Sunday rugby, and he has the opportunity to pledge his allegiance to New Zealand or Australia. I believe he has to do that sometime soon. And I was talking to him, and he said, although he would have a much better chance of playing for the Wallabies than the All Blacks, he is leaning towards signing on, pledging his allegiance to the All Blacks because of the state that the Australian rugby system is in right now. So even though he'd have a better chance of playing for the Wallabies, he wants to side with the All Blacks because he doesn't like the setup of the Australian rugby right now. So, I take it if he got an opportunity to play rugby league in Australia, that, is set up a lot better than Australian rugby right now, that he'd probably consider that even more than playing for the Wallabies. So it's not a great position. Are there any other codes? I mean, young players, yes, they could go to the Super League. We just don't say that often. That's generally a big move. The youngest player that I've heard of over the past couple of years going over there. Youngish players, sort of like Jacob Amo's gone over there and is now, I believe, a consistent starter for, is it Huddersfield over there he plays for?
Okay.
And there's like Jackson Hastings as well. But that's not like starting out your career players. They had a couple of years in the NRL.
And were very much so fringe players. Hastings, not so much. That was a bit of a unique situation there. But yeah, I just can't see it having that much of an impact. Sure, one or two players will decide to go play rugby union or whatever. It's inevitable. But I don't think we'll see a massive shift of like... You know, Kalen Ponga, Payne Haas, David Fafita, Victor Radley, everyone just and leaving and going to play for the Wallabies. Yeah. I just can't see that. I definitely agree with you short term, but I think long term, and I think we've only got to look at how many 18-year-olds have debuted this year. Kids are going to start debuting at 18 because that's the youngest now. I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of young kids coming through. And I just firmly think if they are restricted to a certain amount, then... Even if they just go and sign 1 year for Super Rugby or 1 year in the Super League, get a big paycheck, void it, and can come back to the NRL on big money. I just think it could set up a messy situation, and at this stage, I don't think it's an issue, but it's certainly something the NRL may have to look at in the future. Tackle 2. Obviously, we're going to stay on the NRL. This is an NRL podcast. We're going to ask, what should the NRL focus on here? And this is a tough one, Oz, but like we spoke about before we press record, they want to reduce the interchange, and that's going to slow the game down. Another way the game is being slowed down right now is by trainers. Classic example was the Sea Eagles versus Raiders game last weekend. Raiders made a break. One of the Sea Eagles picked up an injury. Play was stopped. And subsequently, the player was fine. And all it did was give his team a bit of a breather. Now, I believe, Oz, that quite simply, the NRL needs to choose here what their focus is. It's one or the other for me, because I feel as soon as they drop the interchange or focus heavily on play being stopped and try to speed it up like they have with shot clocks, etc., the standard of rugby league is going to drop. We're going to see a lot more errors. And I think if they introduce both of these at once... it will call for a very scrappy, messy brand of rugby league that will not necessarily be enjoyable for the fans.
Well, it sort of contradicts each other, doesn't it?
In the way...
Well, if you want to reduce the interchange, it will sort of slow down the play because players, although they'll get fitter, they'll still get tighter because they're playing more minutes. And, that will just slow down the general run of play, I guess you could say. I know you're talking about trainers coming on and stopping play entirely, but we won't get to those points of momentum as much if we reduce the interchange because players just won't physically be able to put in those extra efforts and get the momentum on their team side for it to be stopped.
Yeah, not just with players stopping it though, with all sorts of stoppages. We've got scrums, we've got dropouts, etc., and they're introducing shot clocks, trying to speed the game up, but it just appears that clubs are finding other ways to slow it down. But would you agree that if they continue their precedence of shot clocks, etc., to speed the game up and will reduce the interchange, as you said, more fatigue, I think that's going to lead to too many errors. I think the NRL has to choose a focus between those two. Would you agree with that, or do you honestly think they could implement both of those at the same time?
Not really. I mean, if we want to talk about the shot clock situation right now as well, how many times do teams wait until there's like 1 second left on the clock, or they'll feed the scrum or take a dropout as the siren rings? And I think there's been like one or two occasions where a team's actually been penalised, or it's a penalty, right? If you run out of time.
It is, but we never see it. We rarely see it called. Yeah,
exactly. And I could swear there's been a couple of occasions I've seen this year alone where it seems like the shot clock has run out and they've kicked the ball after, or they fed the scrum right after, but they've waited for an exact moment where it's hard to call. So it's like the referees are sort of being a bit lenient, even with that. So what's the point? The shot clock's meant to be, let's hurry up and go as fast as we can and try and get this drop out or try and pack this scrum where it seems like players are waiting for the clock to tick down right to the last possible second. So that sort of slows the game down anyway. I don't know. I guess we reduce the shot clock a bit, but then, how much do you shorten it by? I do like the idea of the shot clock and it could work. However, it sort of feels like it's being taken advantage by players as they are waiting for like the last possible second, and the referees are being a bit too lenient for it. As soon as that siren goes, they need to be blowing that whistle. But it seems they're allowing like an extra second or just an extra moment, and the player then kicks the ball or feeds the scrum. So I feel like we need to get a bit more strict with it, and we need to find a way. And I guess that's by shortening it for players to actually feel the need to hurry up and not just wait for the timer to tick down.
Yeah, I agree. So, final thoughts. Would you be in support of the interchange dropping still?
Yeah, but not too much.
Just to 6?
I feel like 6 is good. I think that's a bit too short. You need players to be able to have spells and not just a player come off and one come on, because that's what it'll turn into. We have 4 interchange players. If you have 4 interchanges in a game, it's sort of going to turn into soccer/football where if you make a change, you can't come back on.
Well, that's how it used to be.
Even though that's not a set rule now, and I think it's a rule in rugby union, that's what it'll end up being, because every player on the bench will probably have a go, and if it's 4 interchanges, you can't really bring someone on and then bring them back off, because then a player is going to have to miss out on playing entirely, which we rarely see these days in the NRL. So if we drop it to 4, it's going to be come on and you come off and you stay off. Whereas I think 6, you've got a little bit of leniency there. Yes, a couple of players probably won't be able to come back on, but, you take it as one of those, with 20 minutes to go, a hooker comes on for another hooker. They won't really need to come back on. So I feel like 6 is a good compromise. It's a good way to meet in the middle, yeah.
I agree. And I think I know your answer to this one, but spoke about it briefly there. Trainers stopping play when the player's on his feet near the sideline, it can quite easily be just taken off the side 1 metre, in support of it or not. It's pretty obvious. I'm not sure why we've got to discuss this. I don't know why the referees stop the game for situations like that, particularly when we had a situation where Nene McDonald was quite visibly on the ground and couldn't get up, and they didn't stop play. So definitely more for the NRL to think about there. But let's talk about tackle 3. Let's talk about the Knights coaching situation with everything that's gone on, the good, the bad. I mean, if there even was good. I got a couple questions here, and more are coming to my head as I think now. So I'll get this one out before I forget it.
Yep.
Kalen Ponga's response about I was having a thick shake, so I didn't think about it. And I can't remember what Pierce said, but it also wasn't the most professional response. Were they just being themselves? Were they covering up? Were they told by the club not to say much?
I feel like
Ponga's in particular. Strange, right? And what do you make of it?
I think it's been taken a little bit out of context. I don't think it was meant to be I don't care thing. It was, he shouldn't have said it, but it is something that has been taken out of context. And the media have admitted this. On Controversy Corner, they said it's been taken out of context, and they seem to like to...
They take everything out of context.
Yeah, so...
Do you think Ponga was just trying to avoid the question?
I think he was a bit, but I feel like the media sort of pounced on it and thought, hang on, we can spin this a bit.
Yep.
I think that's what it's been thought as. Look, let's be honest. He really should have been smart enough not to say it. But
just given the landscape of media. Next question I've got, and I think I know your answer to this, and I think you definitely know mine. Was the timing incorrect for the call to, quote-unquote, mutually agree to release Nathan Brown, which we now know is almost definitely not mutual because he's been... mutually agreed again, surprisingly, to separate from the club early or before the season even finished. So, what are you thinking there?
What's your question addressing the immediate
Was
leave?
The timing incorrect with this whole situation?
So the whole thing in general. So them announcing
the announcement,
that he would be
in particular the announcement.
I think so. I think I can understand why Nathan Brown is leaving immediately as a backlash to that announcement. that's been a backlash to the announcement. So the initial announcement, because if they waited to the end of the season, it's likely Nathan Brown would have seen out the season.
Yep.
Which would have been to the benefit of the team, I believe. However, I understand why he's left straight away, because after that performance on the weekend and, reportedly what's going on behind the scenes, I can see him thinking, well, if you don't want me here, it's best I just leave, which is great for his interest, probably not the best interest of the club, but I don't think it's his fault. It's within his right to leave, but because the club didn't handle it well, it has resulted in straight away. I don't like the announcement of it now. Sort of reminds me of Anthony Griffin last year, a bit at Penrith. Newcastle will suffer a bigger impact because Penrith were on the brink of top 4 and they missed out of the top 4 then. They still made the top 8, still made the second round of the finals. However, with Newcastle, it looks like this may cost them their season.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think the timing was absolutely incorrect. But I think it was heavily based off the media's reporting. And from what we saw, Fox Sports, Channel 9, the big players were all starting to get a hold of this story. And as a result, I suppose the Knights sort of felt pressured to make a call. Because, it doesn't look good. And I'm assuming they would have been thinking it's not going to look good if we have these rumours surrounding our club that we may be or we might not be set to sack our coach. Let's come out and be straightforward. In retrospect and hindsight, which is a wonderful thing and they didn't have at the time, absolutely it was the wrong timing because, well, I don't really need to say anything other than the scoreline against the Tigers. As for Brown departing the club, my 2 cents worth on that, Oz, I think the timing for himself is great. Yep. I think he fell on his sword. In my opinion, I will look at Nathan Brown's time in Newcastle as successful. He rebuilt a club coming off 15th, 16th, 16th. And I think they won less games than the Titans. There was one season where they had a draw, not a win. They had one draw with the Raiders. So when I look at Nathan Brown's time there, I think he can leave with dignity. And I'm a little bit upset, actually. I would have hoped that he would have been able to stay there, reap some rewards, and get some NRL finals on his resume because we know he has one in the Super League. Let's move on to, is Adam O'Brien the correct fit as head coach? For those of you that don't know him, for a little bit of context before we hear from Oz, former Melbourne Storm assistant coach under Craig Bellamy, current Sydney Roosters assistant coach under Trent Robinson. So obviously the 2018 grand final last year would have been a little bit of a weird one for him, knowing he lost, but the team that smashed him he's going to next year anyway. But yeah, is he the right man for the job?
It's hard to say right now, and I think the answer for why it's hard to say is obvious because he hasn't been a head coach before. But if we can speculate off what we know, he's been under Craig Bellamy, he's been under Trent Robinson, 2 premiership winning coaches, currently first and second on the ladder. He spent time there, he's learnt. Based off that, we should say it's a good move, right? And I think eventually he was going to get a gig in the NRL. But we really don't know right now. With Garth Brennan, just look at him. He, the king of New South Wales Cup with Penrith. He, was the best coach in that competition. Went to the NRL, to the Titans. He's now sacked. I think O'Brien's in a better position than Garth Brennan was. I don't see Newcastle coming last next year. But I can't sit here confidently and say that Adam O'Brien's going to come in and make them a consistent finals top 4 side. I don't know. I can't see him, being so bad that they finish bottom 4 or anything. Yep. But I don't know if he's the guy to take them to that next level. Nathan Brown has built them to a certain level. He's got them contending for the finals. He wanted to get them to the top 4, wanted to get them to a premiership winning club. He's built them to a certain extent. I don't know if O'Brien is going to continue that ascend.
Yeah. I really like what you said there. Brown has got them to a point. He's built a roster, but he hasn't built a culture or the correct attacking or formations or defense, really. So I'm going to liken O'Brien's situation to Anthony Seibold. He's taking over a club that has a roster ready to perform. He just does. He has Mitchell Pearce, David Clemmer, and of course he's got Jaden Brayley coming next year. Pearce has won an Origin series. Ponga the brightest player in the game. Clemmer arguably the best forward. It's a finals roster. It just is. Some cons now that I can see. Shapes and formation. Now, Pearce and Ponga are both exceptional playmakers. How will they handle new shapes and formation from a new coach who likes his team attacking a certain way? He likes his team hitting the 20-meter mark on the left side of the goalpost for the fifth tackle kick on a certain set of 6. I don't know how they'll respond to that. From what we do know, and because I likened him to Seabold at the start Oz, I'll liken him to Seabold again. Worked great at the Rabbitohs. All those sets that Seabold had, that whole formation, worked spectacular. Didn't work at the Broncos. And as a result, he's lost for answers to the point where he's... Essentially, the Broncos right now are contending based off their individual brilliance. Because they don't have a halfback and they don't have a 5'8". They're missing halves. They have both stand-ins. So potentially that's an issue I think O'Brien could have also. And second, assistant coach. Christian Wolf departing for St. Helens. So that's another big negative for them because there's not even going to be any bit of culture left there. It's all completely rebuilt.
It could be a positive for O'Brien in particular because he now has a bit of a less sticky situation to bring in who he wants.
Right. You are right there. Depending how you look on that, that could be a positive or a negative. Now you've said that, I'm actually probably more so looking at that as a positive. And last but not least, defense wins games. Defense wins premierships. Why are the Raiders the defensively most improved side this year? Because Brett White has been their assistant coach there for years, chipping away at it before it all finally start to make sense. And I suppose this is a little bit of a negative to them not having the assistant coach there. They're going to be restarting that from scratch as well. So whilst he has the roster there, he still has question marks over how he sets up his culture, his attack and defense. Next question. Will the Knights improve? Let's say they finish 9th this year. Will they play finals next year? If you had to make the bold decision. Based off what you know and what could be, what might be.
I'm going to say yes for a little bit of optimism here, but I'm going to be honest. I'm not saying top 4. I'm saying
I agree.
sixth, the highest. I feel like maybe we overestimated them at the start of the season because let's not forget, in 2018, although they didn't have the roster they have now, a lot of people had them for the top 8 in 2018. And hey, they're probably going to finish around the exact same spot they did last year. And they had, people forget, they had a great start to 2018 as well. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a great start to 2019, but they did go through a patch of form similar to this season, not to the extent, but similar. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think, is that just, are they going to get into a Penrith Panthers situation? They've had similar seasons. Penrith, for like the past 3, 4, 5, 2014, they were really good, actually.
Yep.
Probably 2016 started. They go for a patch. Generally, at the start of the season, they lose like near 10 games in a row. Then they go on like a near 10-game winning streak.
Yep.
And then near the end of the... Probably won't happen this season now due to who they've got in their last couple of games, but generally then find a way to just sneak into that top 8.
Absolutely.
Are we going to see a pattern with Newcastle where they're going to go through patches where they win heaps, lose heaps, they look like a premiership winning side, they look like a wooden spoon winning side, and then they end up either lucking into the 8 or just missing out?
We're heading down the same path here. I absolutely agree in the fact that 2018 and 2019 are very similar for the Knights. They're not going to improve their roster. They might improve their cohesion here and there, a bit of chemistry, a bit more experience. Obviously, all key.
Would the new head coach coming in, as you sort of alluded to,
and that's
disrupt that cohesion?
Exactly, and I think that
the chemistry.
I think they might go a little bit forward with O'Brien, but it will disrupt it a little bit to take them a little bit back. And I think what we're going to see in 2020 is the same Knights team. They're going to be in that 6th to 12th. They're not going to be real contenders, and they're not going to be real bottom dwellers. They're going to be in the rat race.
I feel like if they make the 8, they're going to suck in there, possibly with a couple of wins at the end of the season after a losing streak or something like that. They won't be convincing.
And last question before we move on from the Knights. Pretty simple one for me. Where did Brown do good and bad? Good. Well, there's only 2 players left remaining there. The Saifidi brothers, personally, I'd keep them both. from when he took over the club. And the only really bad thing I can say is he didn't take him to the finals. But at the same time, he wasn't expected to with his roster until this year. And he didn't really even get a full chance. He got sacked with 3 weeks to go, essentially, and he was still in contention for the 8. Anything you'd add to those points?
Not really. It's really the Nathan Brown story is a pretty obvious one. Saying he's taken new. When he was first brought in, we knew the job that he had to do. It was made public that they were not going to sack him for coming last the first couple of seasons. That was out of the question because they knew it was possibly the biggest rebuild job in rugby league history. People seem to forget, and I'm sorry if I am disrespecting some of those players or where they were at in their careers back then when they were at Newcastle. That side was not convincing at all. I guess at least with the Gold Coast Titans, they were expected to do better in 2019, but some of the players just weren't playing to their ability. A lot of those Newcastle players were playing, and getting sort of close to victories, were playing, giving their all each and every week, but they just didn't have the talent back then. But Brownie has built that, so...
Let's move on to tackle 4. Let's move on to a different club here because I just checked my phone then and everyone's teeing off on the Knights at the moment. Hooper's currently going at their boss and Matty Johns has just said they're an absolute effing mess. So
I've got that too.
Definitely a fair bit going on there. But let's move on to the Brisbane Broncos. Now, if you guys didn't see my article on it yesterday, you might want to read that before if you can for a little bit of context, but not absolutely necessary. And this is my opinion, but Oz definitely also agrees. We're both under the opinion that the Broncos are going to lose a fair heap of talent over the next year or two, whether they like to or not. And whatever form that is, they could be props, it could be centers, it could be veterans, it could be young guns. They just are. So this year, they've lost Tanner Boyd to the Titans, Nick Arima to the Warriors, James Roberts to the Rabbitohs, and Sewer to the Rabbitohs also. Now, they've re-signed. But it's important to say with this, Oz, none of these players got re-signed for lesser deals. They all got upgraded and extended. Carrigan, Coates, Lodge, Offahengauri, Pakes, TPJ, Turpin. Still off contract. Now, I want you to tell me right now, with all these off-contract players, I want you to hit me with one reply. Priority? You want them signed ASAP? At the right price? Or cut? George Fay.
Probably cut.
Yep. Herbie Farnworth.
He's had a little bit of a go this year, but cut as well.
Okay. Sean Fensom.
For the right price, just because of that experience, although I don't think he has too much longer yet, he just gets into that role for me, but I could easily probably cut him too, but for the right price, and it wouldn't be a lot.
Probably a minimum, I agree. Alex Glenn. For me, he's in between right price and priority.
Yeah, because they do need... Because the thing is, with that forward pack at Brisbane, it's really not experienced. It's shown this season. But Alex Glenn is already a part of that forward pack, so you're not adding experience, but do you lose more experience to re-sign some of these young guys? I'm sort of going to priority. Just because my mentality for Brisbane this season is that they're not doing well because there aren't leaders and there's too many sheep, not enough shepherds, right? Okay. So it'd sort of be contradictory for me to say let's lose one of those shepherds to keep the sheep.
Right.
It sounds weird. I'm calling Payne Haas and David for sheep, but you know what I mean. Like as a group,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to lean towards priority.
Richie Kenner. Coming off an injury, I believe it was significant, ended his season.
I'd probably cut.
I agree.
Unfortunately, he's got a bit of experience, but they don't really need experience in that.
They don't
in that position.
Patrick Mago.
Probably cut as well.
Agree. Corey Oates.
For the priority.
He's the origin winger after all.
Yeah, there are. As you brought up in your article to sort of spoil a bit, you did say they possibly may have to lose Oates to keep Fafita next year.
Right.
But let's think about that for a second. Fafita, although he's had a good season, he's not proven himself as a man who is going to put in that type of effort every year. He's still very young.
Mm-hmm.
So do you still, although the odds are looking okay right now, do you take that risk and lose one of the best wingers in the competition, arguably the competition's best winger for the first half of the season?
It's a tough decision. Isaiah Parisi.
I'm probably going to say cut for now.
Okay, I'd have him as priority.
I wouldn't have him as priority because we haven't seen too much of him this year as well. I know he's come from rugby or whatever. He's got, but he hasn't been that integral to them this season.
No,
he's only sort of just been called up.
I think he's got a lot of potential and he can cover centre or wing. This one's an interesting one. James Seguiaro.
Probably cut, to be honest, because they've got Turpin, McCulloch. For a third string hooker, which Seguiaro would be if he re-signed, someone of that caliber who would demand a certain amount of money, it's too much for a third string hooker. Absolutely. You could say experience or whatever you want. I think we love Segi, but I think you would have to cut him.
I agree. And Sam Tagatese, last but not least, I'm going to have to say cut as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting when I concern the Broncos, because we've just gone over a host of names there. Some big ones, including Oates, Parisi, Seguiaro, Herbie Farmworth, and Glenn, that they can't currently re-sign. Now, they've offered Alex Glenn a reduced deal. They're working through a deal with Corey Oates. But from what we know there, their salary cap is exhausted because they cannot get all these guys on. And this is where it gets really, I guess, the club has to make a lot of decisions. Off contract by 2020. And it's got Darius Boyd here, but I believe that's incorrect. I believe 2021's a player option for him. Jack Bird on $1 million. Now, I don't imagine anyone's going to come for him at November for that price. So it leaves the Broncos in a situation where I think they let Jack Bird go and pay a portion of his salary for that year. David Fafita, I don't need to ask you, it's a priority. Thomas Flegler, again, he's got to be a priority. He's shown enough potential that he's a young prop that you've got to hang on to. Jamil Hopewadi, solid in reserve grade, we haven't seen enough. Reece Kennedy, solid in reserve grade, we're starting to see enough. Andrew McCullough, I think he just sees out his contract and maybe announces his retirement. This one's where it gets really interesting. Anthony Milford. Does he have a future at the Broncos? Because if he does, we know it's not on $1 million. Will he take less, though?
I think
to remain, because you can take less at a new club.
They won't. I don't think that they'll prioritise. I think they'll wait. I think they'll wait and see how we perform starting at that fullback role at the start of 2020 and see how he progresses from there. And then maybe halfway through the season, he's having a good year. I can see them trying to re-sign him because if I'm honest, and I know it's weird because we're talking about Anthony Milford, I don't see a lot of teams rushing to offer him a contract. Yes, I can see the Broncos having a little bit of competition for his signature.
Storm wanted him hard a couple of years ago, but you'd have to imagine they are nowhere near interested anymore.
And I'll tell you what, I'll just say this, as soon as it hits November 1st, Milford's not going to have offers left, right and centre. The Broncos can afford to wait a little bit. Just see how his 2020 is. What
I see happening next for Milford, if I had to make a prediction, I see him receiving overs. I don't see $1 million. I see maybe $800K for a struggling team. You know, the next team that needs a rebuild. I see Milford being their target because they can attract him purely with money because there's not going to be too much external interest. Couple more handy names, Shibasaki and Sean O'Sullivan, but another one that's going to need a big upgrade, Katoni Staggs, currently on a minimum or 100, very low. You have to imagine he's going to go up to about 500. So I think we both agree here. There's a lot of talent there for the Broncos, certainly the most of all NRL teams that are coming up, and because they're in such a unique situation right now where their salary cap is absolutely exhausted.
Yeah,
you'd have to imagine they're going to struggle to re-sign all of those.
Exactly, and I'll tell you another thing as well. I had very close. So it's literally dropped while we've been talking on the podcast. Another sort of hint as well in terms of I really think they need a half to partner Tom Dearden in 2020.
Aiden Caesar.
Yeah, exactly. A Caesar or like a Sam Williams or Trent Hodkinson, I'd even be comfortable with for them.
No, not for the Broncos.
They don't need a star player, though, to complement Tom Dearden. This is more a safe pair of hands. Because how long has it been since Brisbane have had an experienced half?
I know what you mean, but at the same time,
Ben
like,
Hunt. But
if
who
you're
else
looking
is out
for
there?
experience...
Okay, there's Caesar, but who else is there? If they don't get Caesar, who are they going to fall back on?
They bank on Boyd at 6.
How can you when he's not an experienced half, and especially with the...
Look, I absolutely agree with you, but I can say they will not sign Trent Hodkinson to a 1-year deal even.
I know. Well, if they don't do something... Look, if they don't get Caesar and they don't do something, even if they can get Hodkinson, play him at 14, whatever, play him in reserve grade, a Hodkinson or a Sam Williams, Dearden, and then I guess, from the sidelines or behind the scenes, because this player that I'm bringing in is mainly for Dearden, because I think Dearden's going to be the main half there eventually. Yep. It's going to be Dearden and someone else next season.
Look, I like Sam Williams.
I was just saying, I'm not saying they need to...
Yep.
It's like Caesar, then Williams, and then I'd probably say a Trent Hodkinson, right? And that's if they're sort of contingency plans here. But for me, it is that important an issue. And as I said, not a star. Aiden Caesar is a great player. I wouldn't say he's up there with this season as like an absolute freak superstar. If they don't get a player like that, I can't see them making the finals next year. I still can't see it this season. I think, a Parramatta team that, yes, lost to the Bulldogs, like an informed Bulldogs who have been in form, they'll struggle against Para, they might win, and then up against that informed Bulldog side. Okay. With a team like the Tigers, who's on their coattails, who is versing the Dragons next week, possibly they only need to win that game against the Dragons to make the 8. Possibly. Because we've got Penrith going up against the Roosters this weekend, who, they could win. It's my bold prediction that they are going to be, possibly going to win that whole game. But I still think the Roosters will. And then they've got Newcastle, and Penrith and Newcastle, one of them's got to cancel the other out. It's a possibility that the West Tigers could beat the Dragons. I don't think they'll beat Cronulla. They could beat the Dragons. But I think it's more likely that Brisbane are going to lose their last 2 games than the Tigers lose their last 2 games. So I'm even for this season. I still don't think they will. Next season, right, possibly, Fafita and Haas, if they can take on more of a leadership role, which is weird for younger players, but they're sort of at the brink of breaking through to being one of the... They are obviously the main individual forwards, but they need to, be leaders of that cohesive unit. And they need an experienced half just to steady the ship. If they don't get that, that's key for me for their finals chances in 2020, a half. And bringing it back to the topic, where's the money for it? They need one, but where's the money? Caesar's not going to be cheap.
Yeah, I don't think they could get him. They need him, but I don't think they can get him. All right.
Williams possibly not even him.
Yeah. So, well, here's the list here. We've gone a little bit over time, so we'll move on after this. You got to sign one of these Oz. Lachlan Croker, Ben Hampton, Brock Lamb, Benji Marshall, Tamir Martin, Famanua Brown, Cade Cust, Tyson Gamble, Arta Hingano, Trent Hodkinson, Riley Jacks, Billy Walters, Darren Nichols, Sam Williams. Of that list, who do you sign and why?
If I'm the Broncos, I am signing Benji Marshall back. The reason I didn't bring him up is because...
Yeah, we know he'll just re-sign the Tigers. Okay,
but
remove Benji.
Remove Benji. Sam Williams.
Okay, I'm going for Riley Jacks. I reckon they can convince him to move just up the road.
They could, but I think they need more experience than Jacks. The experience is key to me, and the main reason why is, yes, they'll steady the ship, but for Tom Dearden, who's he getting? Who in the halves is mentoring him right now? Darius Boyd, a fullback?
Yep.
He needs a half to mentor him. But is Darren Lockyer doing any work there? I mean, I'm not saying come back to play, but get Lockyer in as the halves coach or something.
Yeah.
Maybe as another contingency plan, because...
Sure.
Dearden needs some guidance. He's got some great raw individual talent, but just like, like Fafita and Haas are lucky that they've broken through this year without much leadership within that forward pack. But Dearden's going to need a guide. He's going to need, you can't have a Padawan without a Jedi Master. Okay,
Right. Yeah,
he's the Padawan. He needs a master.
Well, the forwards still have Offahen, Gowie, Gillette, and Matt Lodge, so that's enough leadership there. But like you said, halves are a different kettle of fish. Tackle 5, Andrew Johns, the 8th Immortal Oz, has absolutely written off the Rabbitohs. Now, I want to read you his quotes from his YouTube segment, Immortal Behaviour, just so everyone, the viewers, yourself, are on the same page. No, they're gone, and I've been tipping Souths. I thought they'd really come good. The injury to Sam is a huge one. I don't think he's fully gotten over that shoulder, and apparently he carried a quad injury. Apparently they said to him, you can only run at 80%. For someone who competes like a champion like Sam, it's impossible. He's got a tear in there now, so he won't be right for the rest of the year. George Burgess is suspended. Adam Reynolds has a back injury, and they really missed Alex Johnston. There's no real penetration. Doey's a nice solid player, but he's not a fullback, so they are no chance now. Absolutely no chance he finishes. First of all, just quickly, do you agree or disagree with that?
I disagree. As in, I can understand where he's coming from, that they're no longer contenders for the premiership. Although let's think back to when they were dominant, when they were playing really well. Yes, Reynolds had his hand in it, and he was playing better than he has the past couple of years. Yes, Burgess is always going to have some sort of an impact. But arguably, for me, South's two best players then were Cody Walker and Damien Cook. Yep. And their cohesion, their chemistry. They're still there. There's still that hope. I believe, personally, and we saw it against Brisbane, I don't think Damien Cook's really dropped in form. I think he's still been creating the opportunities. It's just they're not being taken advantage of as much anymore.
Biggest thing for me is they're missing Sam for a lot of these games and George. They're not getting the proper pack. They're not packing the punch, that they usually do up the middle. And when they do pack that punch, Cookie can get out of dummy half, make those quick darts. Yep. And when Cookie does that, like we saw against the Broncos, albeit for just the 10-minute period, Cody Walker jumps on the back, Adam Reynolds jumps on the back, and the Souths are at their best. So I have to disagree with Joey in the fact that even if Sam does have a tear in that shoulder, he can come back and play the footy we know he can. George will be hungry.
He'll be back for the finals as well.
Exactly.
So it's not like Burgess is out for the whole... And South Sydney are making the finals. Let's be real here.
Yeah,
they're not
definitely
going to miss out on the finals. Burgess will be back. George Burgess will be back for the finals.
Yes.
But yeah, one of the key things for me that they can fix... And yes, this weekend, we obviously didn't see earlier on in the season as much that cohesion with Cook and Walker still. They still won, but we didn't see that. As he said, the quick darts from dummy half, Walker off the back, they were probably the fastest hooker half combination in the competition. They were almost impossible to defend with against when they got going. If they can find that spark again, geez, it's going to go a long way. And they're still there. They're not injured. They're still there. I don't believe Cookie's really dropped off at form. Walker, if he can find that form again, that's sort of the key for me. If Walker can find that form, he's going to be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities that he's been given from Damien Cook. And then, with a returning George Burgess, I tell you, once it comes finals time, and especially with that coach Wayne Bennett, I'm not as confident in him, but I tell you what, I'm not counting him out. I'm not counting them all the way out. Which
brings me to my next point, because I do agree with you. I think that a lot of it depends on Walker and Cook, but I think when I look at that from a broader perspective, then it counts on Sam Burgess, George Burgess coming back, making an impact up the middle. So who holds the key here, Oz? The main key, the biggest key? Is it a coach?
Biggest key.
Or is it a player?
For me, for Souths?
Yep.
I'll put it this way. It's hard not to say Wayne Bennett because he is the coach holding the key, but over the past few weeks, we've not seen very convincing. So I'm going to go the player, and that player...
Okay.
I want to say Damien Cook because he has been, still consistent and playing amazingly. But you could say Cody was the key because if he can unlock that form, I guess you could say, the key analogy. He can unlock that form. That makes Cook look even better because his chances are being taken advantage of. and he's going to be able to create better plays for the forwards when the Burgess boys come running back, when George Burgess is back. So you know what? It could be argued Cook or Walker.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Walker makes the most sense as he has got something to unlock. He's got that form, but it could be Cook because I'd say, Cook has the key because he's really controlling everything. But it's hard to control stuff and create those opportunities when they're not being taken advantage of. So I'm probably going to say Cody Walker kind of holds the key here.
Okay.
Low key holds the key.
There you go. I'm going to go with Wayne Bennett. When I wrote up my article regarding this, if you exclude Craig Bellamy and Des Hasler from the finals, which obviously, they'll both be prominent players, but just in terms of experience, Wayne Bennett has double all the remaining coaches currently within the top 8. I just think when you've got that much experience, you've seen everything in rugby league, and he's seen a lot from his players. And for that reason, I've got to say Wayne Bennett holds the key. Now, because Joey's gone through and said teams that he thinks the Rabbitohs aren't a chance Oz, I've gone through and done a little list now. Group 1 are teams that all the way down to 12th that it can still mathematically make the finals. These are teams that I think are no chance even if they get there. Warriors, Dogs, Knights and Panthers. I just haven't seen enough from them all season. Tigers and Broncos. I've seen too much inconsistency from them all season, and they don't have that regular finals experience. Broncos, maybe you can say, but not in the halves, which is obviously key.
Exact same right there. Literally,
yep.
No additions.
And then my group 2, which are people that I think they could leave a mark on the competition, but I don't think they will. Sharks. Again, they're heavily reliant on too many players, in particular Sean Johnson, Andrew Fafita. They're reliant on them, their individual brilliance to spark the ship. When they're individually great, like we saw against the Warriors, they're great. When they're individually crap, the Sharks are very crap from what we've seen this year. You don't want to be gambling on that in finals. Eels don't have that finals experience. And Rabbitohs, as Joey said, pretty much everything Joey said, there's those concerns there. They could overcome it. They could not. I've gone with those 3 in my group 2.
I've got 4, and I've got a couple of differences in my group. Sharks, Eels.
Yep.
Yes. I've kept South Sydney in my next group because I've had them there all season. And as I said, there just needs to be that little bit of a spark. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. They're teetering in my top group, though. But I've also got Manly in my group 2. Why? Finals experience. I know they've been amazing this year. Mm-hmm. And yes, let's just say they did win the premiership, either of those guys. Would I be heaps surprised and shocked and like, what? That came out of nowhere? No. Mm-hmm. But as I said, finals experience is key. I sound like a broken record on my page and everything. People say, why do you think Manly and Canberra win the grand final? We've seen in the past. I'm just going to say this once as my argument. Since 1998, the rejoined competition, we've seen 3 teams win the premiership after not being in the finals the year before. Penrith 03, Tigers 05, Roosters 13. Other than that, every other team has at least made the finals the year before, and most have made it like at least 2 or 3 seasons before that. You need a bit of a finals experience for that. And if we're looking at Manly and Canberra, yes, they've been in the finals a couple of years ago. What happened with Manly in 2017? They made the first week of the finals, got knocked out by Penrith. Mm-hmm. Could you really call that genuine experience?
You can't, because the example I'll give, because I agree with you, Roosters won last year, 2013, 14, 15 minor premiers, 2016 and 17, I believe, preliminary, if not semi-finals.
2016 actually finished near the bottom of the...
Oh, sorry. Besides that, you're right, that was the year where Mitchell Pearce had all the drama and stuff. Just discarding that 1 year, sorry, and they have genuine excuses for that year. And my apologies there. But to jump on the back of what you're saying there, 3 minor premierships and consistent semis or preliminaries aside 1 year.
And then there's just the Melbourne juggernaut that keeps on chugging. So and that's another reason why I don't. And they're still the top 2 teams for a reason. Mm-hmm. Yes, the regular season, Manly might get a win over Melbourne, Canberra might get a win, but if you take them to Amy Park during the finals, especially a preliminary final, I really don't see Manly winning that 11-10. I really don't see Canberra coming back from 18 points down to win that in a preliminary final at Melbourne. To me, it's a bit of a different situation.
All right, we are running out of time here. We've got about 5 minutes left before we hit our hour mark. So we'll move on to tackle 6 here. Obviously, guys, a lot of great players are departing the NRL for Super League this year, or they're retiring. So what we did before the podcast started, we went through and put them 1 to 17. We did a team. We're just going to give a brief sentence or just a brief little word on their career or how they might be remembered in our eyes. So we'll start off with our fullback here, Michael Flash Gordon. For me, a gentleman of the game who was never involved in anything poor on or off the field, and a true role model for all young guns coming through.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to purely on field here.
Okay.
Purely on field, reliable, never flashy, which is a bit hard to say about the Flash, but he's not like Tuivasa-Sheck or Tedesco, who's always going to come up with the big players and that and the highlight reels and the best in the game, but consistent, reliable. If he's under a high ball, under pressure, 9 times out of 10, he's going to catch that high ball. Whereas some players like Tedesco or Tuivasa-Sheck sometimes might drop that ball. He is definitely reliable. He rarely makes a mistake. He's always in there giving 100%. I feel like when Michael Gordon retires, though, and I don't like saying someone's the next something, but I really see Corey Thompson in a similar mold to Michael Gordon on field. Reliable, I think, in that fullback role.
Nathan Ross. I think someone who gave his all every week, no matter what the scorecard read.
Yeah, it was a bit of a meme, but he did genuinely have a go each.
Which a lot of the Knights didn't back then.
Yeah, epitomises what it means to be a cult hero.
Greg Inglis. For me, the most dominant man with ball in hand, that rhyme almost, that I've ever seen play rugby league. And obviously I'm too young to have seen Mal Meninga, etc. But from what I've physically seen with my own eyes, he's the most dominant force I've seen with the ball in his hand.
A transformer. And no, I'm not talking about the car. He went from a skinny meat guy at Melbourne who was, in the flashy even when he was out in the centres. But when he went to Souths, bulked up, he changed his style a bit. Playing at fullback, he was a dominant burst through the line fullback, same as when he was in the centres at Souths. If you got a Greg Inglis palm, you weren't getting back through that. So, transformative.
Yeah, just ask Jamie Soward. I think he's on his highlight reel, isn't he?
Jamie, are you talking like in terms of
Greg
the palm?
Inglis just smashes him?
Him.
Yeah. I think it was, yeah. Blake Ashford, for me, sort of a journeyman that had a lot of potential at the Tigers but never lived up to it.
I remember him being an important piece of the West Tigers side of the late to early 2000s to 2010s when they were like a top 4 side. They just never won the premiership. He was, I think, him and Tim Moulton, who was at fullback there, and even Bo Ryan, they were looking pretty good at that stage of their career. That back five was a very promising back five.
Sasaya Feki, consistent without being great.
Yeah, he sort of teetered. He's teetered a lot on being one of the best wingers in the game. He's just not reached it yet. Great team performer, though.
Yep. James Maloney, the best genuine 5'8", and obviously, JT played 6 in rep and stuff, but the best genuine 5'8" since Darren Lockyer.
Yeah, out and out 5'8". Who else have we really seen as an out and out 5'8"?
Benji, I guess, but Benji played a lot of years at halfback as well for Dragons.
Yeah, you could say Jamie Soward, but I'd have Maloney above him. Jamie Soward had some good years there. Yeah, Maloney, I'd definitely agree with that. I mean, I think Penrith, I think the Warriors and the Panthers are the only side that haven't won a premiership while he was there. But the majority of the sides he was with, they won a premiership while he was at the club. So,
Cooper Cronk, future immortal for me, especially when you look at his stats. He's often played off as the second fiddle to Cameron Smith, but statistically, based on Maroons and Kangaroos wins, he actually was more integral to a side than Cameron Smith. Possibly
the greatest brain we have ever seen in the game.
Yep.
He can work out tactics. He can do, it takes him a millisecond to look at the defensive line. He's like, okay, I've got to do this. And he knows. And he's a great leader too when his team's under pressure. He's always talking and he's always getting his into the game. He's always... He can lead a whole team. And I can't wait next year if they don't do it, because I believe he will be commentating for Fox League next year. If they don't do a show with him and Matty Johns where they actually break down games and get technical, which they haven't had a show like that for a few years, I'm going to be mad. Because I believe that would be an amazing watch.
George Burgess. I probably won't remember George so much, more so the trio of brothers and the time that all four of them played in the same game.
Yeah, look, if I had to, and it's weird to rank the Burgess, but it's Sam first and then probably George second. Overall, there has been times where George has played better than Sam, I reckon. But
yeah, I think he had a very big grand final in 2014.
Yeah, for me, he's the second best Burgess, bro.
Okay. Robbie Farah, for me, probably the second best hooker of this generation, behind Cameron Smith. Another one of those hookers that just existed in the Smith era.
Yeah, a bit controversial too. We possibly not the greatest player to coach for a lot of coaches.
Yep.
I mean, he seems to be fine right now with Maguire. Probably got on with Maguire while at Souths as well. Tim Sheens. But, after Sheensy left, he just seemed a bit uncoachable. So I'll at least say a great individual player, not a team player.
Matty Scott, for me, the last of the dying hard men in rugby league. He received the baton from Shane Webke and ran with it. And I think maybe David Clemmer's taken the baton from him. I don't see who could be next.
I wouldn't say he's exactly Shane Webke level.
Okay.
But he was definitely great. He's 110% effort each and every week.
Yeah.
Deserves all the accolades he can get.
John Sutton. I'm going to go ahead and say the greatest Rabbitoh of the NRL era. Without a doubt. Won a premiership, most capped of all time, loyalty personified.
Behind Brian Fletcher, right? Surely Fletch gets it. No,
yeah, with his 13% win rate as captain.
It's definitely John Sutton. He was also a bit of a versatile player. I think it was mid-2000s, I believe he played in the halves for a little bit for Souths. He's been South Sydney captain for a while too. He has held the captaincy in his earlier days as well. Does my memory serve me correct, or was it?
I know he was definitely the captain for a period there, but not sure.
He was definitely. So he's been a leader there for years. Like I remember even at Souths. So definitely, I agree.
Number 12. Now he isn't retired, but he is departing for the English Super League. Manu Ma'u, for me, a player that seems that his best years are still ahead of him. Yeah,
a player. I was about to say.
His combination with Mitchell Moses this year has been pretty phenomenal, really.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Okay. Paul Gallen. And I don't know how I'm going to remember him because I'm a Queenslander, but I do acknowledge he is one of the greatest lock forwards to ever play rugby league.
It's weird. Overall, he will be remembered as the New South Wales guy during New South Wales' worst era.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Also, the peptide things over his head.
Yeah, he will be remembered probably overall as New South Wales' best player, as in he played for New South Wales consistently, was the captain. And, people from New South Wales love to say, I love Gow, whatever, but he was the best player during the worst era. I mean, arguably Joey Johns was the best player during the best era, or the dearest, but Gallen is a New South Wales legend, but probably during the worst possible time to be a New South Wales legend.
Gareth Widdop. I think one of the best English halves I've seen play the game. In the NRL, that is.
Yeah, definitely one of. I can't think of too many others. I think there used to be like a plethora back in like the day, so we really can't say, but that 2018 season for the first half, he was the best player in the game, the informed player in the game, and
definitely
the effort he would put in and week out was astronomical, and I'll never forget that. He's proven he can be the dominant player in a dominant team.
Jeremy Lattimore, for me, a consistent journeyman.
And, sometimes people see journeyman something that's bad, as in, clubs don't want to give him or whatever, but
it does have a negative stigma attached to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I don't see that as a negative for Lattimore. Like, Flash Gordon was a bit of a journeyman, but that doesn't mean it was a bad thing. Both players are sort of similar in the sense that they always gave 100% and 10%. Like what you said, a player like Kalen Ponga, his best and his worst are very far. But a guy like Lattimore, best probably isn't as best as Ponga, but his worst is nowhere near how bad. And that's just an example.
Exactly.
A player like Ponga can play. His best and his worst are very, very close to each other. So, a great player.
Scott Bolton, interesting one for me. I'll remember him as a great Cowboy that served the club well and won their maiden premiership with them.
Yeah, I'll remember him in the same vein as like a Sean Fenton.
Yeah.
Gavin Cooper, James Tarmo, in that, the forward pack wasn't filled with big names. Matt Scott, yes, a bit of a big name. Gavin Cooper had some good accolades, but a part of a solid premiership winning forward pack.
And our last one, Mahe Fanua. Interesting one because he, for me, probably one of the strongest outside backs I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I've got no doubt if he had like a wrestling match with Blake Ferguson or Addo Carr or any of these other world-class wingers, he would smash them. But discipline was an issue. I guess, and this is kind of weird because I do really like Mahe and we do talk a bit, but he never, I don't know how to say this, he never really lived up to his potential. I just got to say it. He could have been so much more. And that's not to say he's not a great player. It's more so how highly I do rate him. Because I tipped, if you remember, Corey Thompson to be the Tigers' highest try scorer this year. Because I thought Fanua would have a breakout year and break all these tackles and get the offload similar to like a Greg Inglis used to. Obviously, that ended up being incorrect. But that's how highly I do rate Fanua.
For me, I can see him back in the NRL. I don't know if his time in the NRL is done, but I'm not as...
I think he remains at Hull. I think he'll remain at Hull.
I'm not confident. I'm saying come back. I can see it happening. Like with George Burgess, I can't see him coming back. Gareth Widdop, can't see him coming back.
Yeah, you're right. He is probably... him and Mahu were the ones we might see back.
Most likely to see back. Ma'u, I think he will come back eventually. Fanua, I think it sort of depends on his form, because if he plays really well in Super League, I think he might be happy there. If he's playing really bad, he might probably come back or stay there and try and, maybe go to a new club over in England. But if he's he's playing all right, but not a star, I can still see an NRL club showing interest in him maybe coming back, thinking, okay, I've played to a certain extent, I can come back to the NRL and build on that.
Provide some value,
Yeah, so I think it all depends on his form over in England.
Absolutely. So. All right, guys, well, that's the team. That's the episode. That's the show wrapped up. 6 tackles with Clarkey and Ozza on the Set of 6 NRL podcast. Had a bit of fun today. Enjoyed the show, Oz?
Yeah, I did. No, absolutely hated it. Always hated it.
All right, guys.
Best part of my week.
Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. If you want to check out the social media pages at Set of 6 NRL Podcast on Instagram, Set of 6 NRL Podcast on Facebook, check those out. Daily interactive content where we look to engage the audience. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers.